Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And it's a real honour to follow the Honourable Member for Brigg and Goole, who spoke with great passion and obviously shared with the House his own personal experience of the modern manifestations of anti-Semitism. Can I congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Dudley, for the way in which he opened the debate today, and the tone in which he set it, and the fact that we see so many members from both sides of the House that have gathered here today. It's also a great testament to the very important work of the Holocaust Educational Trust and the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust. And I think it's important to reflect on what Holocaust Memorial Day actually is, and why do we commemorate it on the 27th of January? The answer is that it marks the date when the Red Army liberated Auschwitz-Birkenau in 1945. That was the site where nearly 1 million people were murdered. But as we know, this was just one of the many terrible death camps across Europe, and I reflect on my own family experience. On my mother's side alone, we know that more than 100 members of her family, aged between the ages of 4 to 83, were sent by the Nazis to their death in the gas chambers of not just Auschwitz, but also Treblinka, Sobibor, Mauthausen and Bergen-Belsen, for no other reason than they were Jewish. And it is beyond our comprehension that humans are capable of inflicting such horrors on other humans. It questions the very nature of humanity and leads us to the contemplation of evil. And yet we've continued to witness horrors in our own times, in Cambodia, in Rwanda, in Bosnia, and this House has recently debated the plight of the Rohingya in Burma, driven from their homes, their villages in flames. But humanity never seems to fully learn the lessons of history, and that's why Holocaust Memorial Day and what we're discussing today is so vital, and why continuing Holocaust education is so critical, so we can do everything possible to ensure that it really doesn't ever happen again. And it's why we celebrate the lives of survivors, who are now into their 80s and 90s, like Susan Pollock MBE, who I had the privilege to share a platform with at Labour Party conference in Liverpool just a few months ago. Susan was in Belsen when the British liberated it and still visits schools to talk about her own experiences. And it's why we now mourn the passing of so many Holocaust survivors, particularly in the past year, such as Mireille Knoll, who lived through the occupation of Paris, but was murdered this year at the age of 85 in a hate crime. Or Gina Turgle, who survived 4 concentration camps. She tended to the dying Anne Frank in Belsen and went on to marry a British soldier just 6 weeks after liberation. Every single one of those survivors' testimony aids our understanding, it adds to our history and helps educate the next generation.
I thank the honourable lady for giving way during what is such a moving and powerful speech, and like her, I was extremely moved by Ms Pollock's testimony at a Conservative Party conference. But does she agree with me that the declining numbers of Holocaust survivors is another reason why it is so extremely important that the recorded testimony of those survivors, it must have a central role in the new learning centre?
Well, I thank the honourable member for his intervention. It's a very important one, and I've seen the testimony, for example, that's housed at Yad Vashem, a project that's funded in part by Steven Spielberg, that's done so much to capture the stories and the backgrounds, and that for every single person that perished, there is a whole history and family that have been impacted into the modern day today. So it's absolutely critical, and for every single Holocaust memorial, whatever it may present, however it may present itself, in particular the new national memorial that we're due to have here, having those testimonies at the centre are absolutely critical for ensuring that they really impact on that next generation. The important point, though, is that the Holocaust didn't start with the gas chambers. It started with ideas. It started with books, with newspapers, with films, with torchlight processions, with speeches. It culminated with crematoria, but it began with words. It had its roots in the warped racial theories of the 1890s. It had its roots in conspiracy theories, such as the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. The Nazis didn't invent anti-Semitism, but they modernised it, and they made it a state religion and turned an industrial state into a machine for killing every Jew in Europe. And we should ask how. How was such a thing possible in a civilised European country? Now, one answer lies in the compliance of a civilian population. And now, in this past year, we've also lost the writer Primo Levi. He was in Auschwitz, and he wrote that monsters exist, but they are too few in number to be truly dangerous. More dangerous are the common men, the functionaries ready to believe and to act without asking questions. And this is an aspect of the Holocaust that we need to learn the most from. Not the SS who enjoyed the torture and killings, but the thousands of people in the civilian police, the railways, the civil service, who never challenged what they knew to be happening, never questioned the plans they were helping to implement, who looked the other way. They saw those trains heading east, but they never wondered why no one ever came back, even for a day. And at what point could it have been stopped? Surely the lesson for us today is that unless we challenge the words, it is much harder to challenge the deeds. We cannot be bystanders. We cannot walk by on the other side. In the 1930s, it was Der Stürmer, which ran from 1923 onwards with its unceasing anti-Semitism. It told its readers week after week that Jews spread disease, and the caption on every front page read that Jews are our misfortune. But today, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is social media. With all the manifestations of modern anti-Semitism, Jews secretly run the banks, organise 9/11, profit from wars, manipulate the media and have loyalties to foreign powers. When people deny the Holocaust or claim that Jews exploit it, we cannot be bystanders. When people online draw up lists of Jews in the media, we cannot be bystanders. When people use the term Zio or Rothschild instead of Jew to cover their racism, we cannot be bystanders. Whether it's the neo-Nazis or those that think they belong to the left, we must say no and call it out loudly as loudly as we can, every single time. It must be challenged swiftly, without favour, no matter where it rears its very ugly head. I'll end with a quote from Primo Levi. He said, "It happened, therefore it can happen again." This is the core of what we have to say. It can happen, and it can happen everywhere.